Hey everybody, hope your day is going well. It is time for Cloudy with a Chance of Learning.
And we have an interesting topic today for Tropical Tuesday.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the hurricane hunters. It's the people who fly into hurricanes to gather data, and we're going to talk about why what they do is so important. Now, first of all, it's important to remember where tropical wave formation occurs, and that's So tropical wave formation occurs over into Africa. And remember, we have a wave that will move over the Atlantic Ocean. Once that happens, we get thunderstorms that start to form over water. These thunderstorms continue off to the west, and the storms can get more organized and start to rotate. And typically, once they start to approach this area, we could start to see the hurricane hunters taking flights and gathering information from these storms. So I see a few people saying hello. Let me go ahead and say hello back. Hello to Matthew. Hello to Addison. I hope you're all doing well. Darlene, hello to you. Alice, hello. Gerald from Harlandale ISD, hello to you. And hello to Carmen. I hope you're all doing well. So once these storms start getting to be within a certain distance of the United States, or maybe even down here towards an area we like to call the Lesser Antilles, or even the Greater Antilles, the hurricane hunters will start to fly these storms. This is going to be whenever these storms start to threaten land or kind of can threaten a certain area that the United States wants to keep an eye on. We could see these men and women who fly into hurricanes to data and keep us all safe. We could start to see them flying into these storms, and especially when these storms get closer and closer to the United States and have that threat of being a damaging hurricane, these men and women will get closer to these storms. So what kind of aircraft fly into these storms? It's not just any kind of aircraft. The Air Force Reserves fly into these storms, and so do the NOAA Corps. So NOAA Corps is National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They have a group that flies into hurricanes. They fly WP-3 Lions. That is the aircraft in the middle. The Air Force Reserves fly the WC-130Js. That's that aircraft at the top. Notice both of those are propeller planes, with the spinning propellers, and then you also have jets that will fly, but jets don't fly into the storms. These propeller planes will fly very low into the storms while gathering data, and they'll drop things called a drop sign, which is an instrument that flies through the storm and gathers data from the flight level all the way down to the surface into the water. These signs are kind of similar to the weather balloons that we've talked about in previous weeks.
So what is the biggest difference between a weather balloon and a drop sign? We both know that they, of course, measure temperature, dew point, also wind gusts, wind speed. But, of course, weather balloons, you're kind of forecasting more towards, I guess, what is the big difference? Like hurricanes, you're looking at the now, that kind of updates the category of the hurricane and the storm itself, right?
Right, it does.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find information for a specific spot when we use these drop signs.
Okay.
For weather balloons, you're kind of taking information from across the United States. Remember, they get launched twice a day by our National Weather Service offices all across the U.S. Those all go up, and they give us kind of a snapshot of what the atmosphere is doing as a whole across the United States.
Okay.
These drop signs are more focused on a certain spot, like a hurricane or a tropical storm, or even just an invest, an area where it looks like development is possible. And so the hurricane hunters fly out, they drop these in there to get more information on the storm, to see the health of the storm. It's kind of like when you go for a checkup to the doctor.
Yeah, and I know meteorologist Stacia Wilson, she had touched on weather balloons in one of these weather classroom talks, and she talked about a radiosonde. Now, a radiosonde is much smaller compared to a drop sonde, which is kind of like this tube form, right? So it's much bigger.
And we're going to see a photo of a drop sonde here in a moment, handled by somebody on the aircraft who has the title of Loadmaster, and they are the drop sonde operator.
Okay, and we have a lot of people joining us. We have Matthew. Shelly says hi. Hey, Shelly, glad you're joining us. Amy also says hi. Hey, Amy, glad you're joining us again today. And Matthew says, I'm thinking about drawing a picture of the solar system with faces and arms. That's awesome. I love that.
Send it our way. We'd love to see it, Matthew.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we have the 2 aircraft that fly through and low in the hurricanes. That's the P-3 Orion and the C-130J.
Okay.
And then the Gulfstream. So this one will be flying way up high in the hurricane. The other 2, imagine them really low to the surface. They're flying through the hurricane. The Gulfstream actually flies above the hurricane. And it typically, when you have the Gulfstream out there flying above the hurricane, it's trying to get an idea of steering currents and the upper level health of the hurricane. So way up high above the storm, or high up into the storm rather. The Gulfstream 4 is gathering data to see where this storm could go. One of the big reasons why these men and women fly into these hurricanes is because we have a lack of data over water. When you're over land, we have all these different weather sites that are constantly gathering information. And information is so important in the weather world because you're trying to predict the future.
And so the big instrument to use would be sats in space. They can see over the ocean, unlike radar, which is, of course, only on land.
Right, but they can only give us so much information. And that's why these hurricane hunters, they fly into the storms to gather more information and find out more about the system. Now, we also have some other things out there that are gathering information, and those are buoys out on the water. And sometimes ships will gather information for us, but the problem is these ships can't go into the storms. It's not safe. These aircraft are really sturdy. They're really strong. These C-130s are like tanks in the sky. I mean, that these men and women, they are risking their lives, but they are also in very strong aircrafts. So when we talk about a C-130, it's a strong aircraft that can handle these stronger winds, the storm.
And they practice a lot with these aircrafts too. I remember we actually went kayaking in Biloxi, Mississippi, and we saw 2 right over us, and it was just crazy cool to see that.
Yeah, something interesting to know too, where these men and women fly out of. Where are they based? Here in San Antonio, we have Lackland Air Force Base. We have an Air Force Base. In Biloxi, Mississippi, at Keesler Air Force Base, that's where the Air Force Reserve's hurricane hunters fly out of. So they don't fly out of here in San Antonio, but similar to how we have an Air Force Base, they have an Air Force Base in Keesler, in Biloxi, and that's where the C-130s fly out of. But the P-3 Orions and the Gulfstream 4, those 2 aircrafts fly out of an airport in Lakeland, Florida, which, to let you know where that is, it's just east of Tampa, kind of.
Okay.
And they actually used to fly out of Tampa, but they ended up moving their operations from to kind of stay away from the coast where more damage could occur. So all a little bit of random facts there. It's a lot to take in, but that's just kind of a little bit to know about what the aircraft are that they. And this is the inside of a C-130J.
And they're huge.
They are very large aircraft, and they're very noisy. Actually, everybody inside the aircraft, if you were sitting right next to somebody while it's running, you would not be able to hear them. You would have to have a headset on to talk to them. And the entire time you're on the flight, you actually need to have earplugs in, and you'll still hear the loud humming sound of the aircraft. But this is what the inside looks like. And we have a few different people who are on board the aircraft that are gathering information. I see Matthew says, I mix y'all with the Weather Channel sometimes, lol. Hey, you know, we're all meteorologists. We all, you know, we're all in that same mission. I like to say all meteorologists have the same mission. It is to keep the public informed and safe. And that's what these men and women are doing too. We have the Aerial Reconnaissance Weather Officer. This is the meteorologist on board that aircraft. And sometimes the people in other positions are also meteorologists. I actually know that one of the pilots is also a meteorologist. So sometimes the people who are all throughout the aircraft are also meteorologists, but the person that's gathering or rather trying to decipher a lot of the weather information as it comes in is the Aerial Reconnaissance Weather Officer.
And that's kind of why we love the Tropical Weather Conference too in South Padre, It's because, you know, the hurricane hunters come out, they show the aircraft too, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And they just kind of tour all around, you know, all over the place, really. And you get to see the aircraft and talk to them, talk about updates, because, of course, technology just gets better and better over time. So, of course, the cone is also getting smaller with the 2020 hurricane season. So that's just kind of a little tidbit of, you know, all the technology, all the data, all the research that goes into hurricane forecasting and just observations as well.
Yeah, and you know, it's not just the Air Force Reserves that shows up to this hurricane conference either. The C-130s from the Air Force Reserves will show up, and then the P-3 Orion, and then the Gulfstream 4. Sometimes they bring the P-3. They actually typically don't bring it to the conference, but they'll bring the Gulfstream 4, which I believe goes by the name of Gonzo. They have fun names.
So they have fun names. I like that.
Gonzo is a Muppet, by the way, if you're not aware. Kind of like Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy, just all sorts of different names, and they all have fun with their jobs, of course, but taking it seriously while at the same time. So the picture on the left there, that is the inside of a C-130, and that's the cargo area. That's not obviously where the pilot sits. That's not the cockpit.
Okay.
That is the cargo area, and within that cargo area, that is actually where our aerial reconnaissance weather officer will sit. And you see she's also gathering some information on angle. You see that she's kind of taken paper, trying to find the best flight path, trying to find different angles within the storm. The photo and just below her on the screen there, you'll see that there's a shot of the radar. There's a lot of radars on this aircraft. A lot of images of radar. You're going to see it in most of the pictures we show. Pretty much everybody on this aircraft is looking at a radar to make sure everyone stays safe and they don't put themselves in a more dangerous situation than what they need to be in. So that was when they were in the eye of Hurricane Joaquin. I was actually on this flight. I took these photos. I got to fly with them as a media member into Hurricane Joaquin. It was a Category 4 hurricane. And they were out there gathering information on the storm that was currently, when we were flying over the Bahamas, gathering information when it was over the Bahamas, because it was threatening the east coast of Florida. And of course, we have a lot of important things over towards the Bahamas as well that we want to keep an eye on, from people to property. And that's one of the reasons why they were following this storm so closely. So that's when we were in the eye of the hurricane. You can kind of see the middle part of the storm right here. There's the eye, and right in the middle, that's the aircraft, and that's where we were as we through the storm. So continuing through here, you know, that's the Aerial Reconnaissance Weather Officer. I mentioned this earlier. This is a very important person on board. It is the load master and dropsonde operator, and there's that dropsonde we were talking about. Meteorologist Meagan Massey mentioned it earlier. It's not a tube.
And we have one in our weather center too.
We do. I wish we could have it, but of course we're practicing social distancing and staying away from the station right now. And we're at home. But there's some more dropsondes. That's where they're being kept, right above their computer here. And there you have it, another radar located on the screen. So, like I said, pretty much everybody on board is watching the radar. They want to make sure everyone stays safe. And the information that they're gathering from these dropsondes comes in the form of a skew-T graph.
And we use skew-Ts as well with weather balloons too. So they kind of are hand in hand with both tropical and severe weather seasons.
Yeah, and something unique with how a skew-T kind of shows our weather information when we're talking about like a weather balloon. It shows it from the surface up way high. But what's really unique about these dropsondes, the information is coming in real-time data, so you get to watch the information come in.
So I want to add something, because you got to ride along with Hurricane Joaquin. Now, for me in college, during my college days, I actually used to launch weather balloons for the National Weather Service, in Memphis, Tennessee. And all the data that we would receive from launching multiple weather balloons across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, up into Tennessee, that would actually get fed into the Storm Prediction Center. And the Storm Prediction Center will call National Weather Service and say, hey, due to the data we've received from, Mississippi State's weather balloons, I think these counties should be included in either a severe thunderstorm watch or tornado watch hours in advance to any severe weather events. So talking about the real time, seeing these weather balloons and getting the radio sound, of course, you had to be very careful with that instrument. You couldn't touch it in certain places or it could ruin the data. But we would actually fly the weather balloon because the wind would take it kind of away. So of course the balloon wouldn't go straight up. It would travel a far distance depending on shear that day.
Which is information that you want to know. You want it to go kind of away if you're trying to get a good idea of what the winds are doing.
Right. So you'd get that vertical profile. You'd look many levels, thousands of feet into the atmosphere until the balloon pops. And then you would see the data just real time. So you'd see the temperature and the dew point and the skew T kind of go up, and you'd know where the dry air is, if there was a cap in place, the cape in general, just so many different things, wind direction, wind speed. So I just wanted to add that little tidbit because I just love those days.
Yeah. And again, these instruments, they have so much information. The radio science, they have so much information, or rather weather instruments within them. They're gathering all sorts of different data as they're going through the storm. And so these are going not from the surface up, but from the flight level, wherever they're flying from, down.
So that's the biggest difference.
Yes. And there's 3 spots that they typically try to launch them out. They'll go, when they're coming through the hurricane, they'll hit the eye wall as through. They'll send it out. They'll continue to fly. They'll send one out in the middle of the eye to get an idea of the health in the middle of the storm. And then they'll put one through when they go through the eye wall again. They'll send it out. And something amazing to see is sometimes you get a stadium effect inside of a hurricane.
That is the coolest thing. That is on my bucket list, honestly.
And we didn't have the best stadium effect in Hurricane Joaquin, but I did get to sit in the cockpit of the aircraft of the C-130 while we flew into the eye. And something that happens is, why it's called stadium effect is because you're in this big bowl. Remember, in the middle of a hurricane, there's an eye. And you could look up and see blue sky if the storm is very healthy.
So this is way on top of the storm.
Right, right. So we're flying low, but if you're looking down, you can see all the way down to the surface because of that eye, if it's a very healthy storm. And when you punch through that cloud cover, all of a sudden, blue sky overhead, and it looks like you're in a giant bowl. It's huge.
Yeah.
But a fascinating thing, and there's some videos online too that you can check out. We can't necessarily show them here just because we don't have rights to those videos. But if you wanted to see them, look up Stadium Effect Hurricane on or Hurricane Hunters on YouTube, and you're bound to find some really cool videos. So
you have a little bit of homework to do then.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff to check out.
Cool homework though.
By the way, this was one of the passes that we had that was a little messier. It didn't have the best look outside, but that's within a Category 4 hurricane within the eye. And again, that is not the cleanest look. Our first pass was the cleanest, but you can see a little bit of light, and then you can also see the ground down here. And remember, you wouldn't be able to see that if it was if you were within the eye walls or further within the hurricane. You can only be able to see the ground within the eye. But sometimes you do have a few clouds within the eye if the storm, especially if the storm isn't as healthy at that point. So moving on, the pilot and the navigator. Now those are 2 different people.
Okay.
But notice 2 radars there in front of the pilot.
Or radars.
Yep. So there will be somebody sitting here, and just to this gentleman's right, there's actually another person sitting here, and then behind them you have the navigator, and they are watching these computers right here. Notice the map, navigation. Remember, we're talking about maps. Where are we? We're going, get an idea. That would be what the navigator's doing, and there you have it, another radar. So that's what's so, it's so important to know where you are within the storm. You don't want to put yourself in danger. Obviously, you're in some of the most powerful systems in the world, weather systems, and you want to make sure you stay safe. So that's what these pilots, the navigators, the aerial reconnaissance weather officers, and the loadmasters are all trying to do.
So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, and I know we had some people ask some questions, so I want to make sure I answer some of these. My sister's watching. Hello, Ellie. Love this. Very informative and fun. Thank you, Ron. No problem.
Thanks, Ron.
Matthew has a quick question. If you guys could control a weather element, what would it be? I would say I would want to control hurricanes and make them never hit land.
Mine would be,
that would be my answer.
Mine would probably be tornadoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we could, hurricanes are important because they help distribute warm air at the equator to the poles and keep our planet more equal in temperature. So hurricanes are important, but if I could guide them and make sure that they don't hit land.
That would be the tornado thing, like don't hit anybody, so that would be the same thing there.
Ellie says, I'm not a fan of snow. Ellie, you are correct. I do not like snow. If I could live in a tropical place or somewhere warm, like here in San Antonio, my entire life, I would be absolutely fine with that. Amy says, thank you for showing this to us. No problem, Amy. Robert says, before Kelly Air Force Base was closed by the BRAC, C-130s and C-5s could be seen over San Antonio.
How cool is that?
That is cool. I think they sent the C-130s to Jacksonville, the Air Force Base in Jacksonville. That is Arkansas.
Yeah. So if you've seen the C-130s over San Antonio, then that's a massive aircraft.
Yeah.
Logan's also joining us. Hey, Logan. Happy that you're here.
Yeah, welcome. So what are these aircraft that go into hurricanes? They're gathering information for the National Hurricane Center. So all this information goes not just into the weather models that we use to predict, but it goes to the National Hurricane Center, and they create that cone. Remember that cone of uncertainty we talk about, where it's like it could hit on the left side of the cone or the right side. Well,
and they're improving the cone, by the way, through each year. So the 2020 forecast cone of uncertainty should be a little bit smaller compared to 2019's hurricane season. So there is going to be advances. And also the NHC, they do release their own prediction about the hurricane season. So we'll, of course, show you that at some point, too.
Yeah, and these aircraft, they not only help make the forecast more precise, like, for instance, the National Hurricane Center will put out a forecast, but it will cover a large area. But the second these pilots get out there, they're flying these hurricanes, or these squadrons are out there flying these hurricanes, they are able to make that forecast, instead of being a wide area like this, they're able to make it more precise, really shrink it down. So that's why what they do is so important. They are able to help make that forecast more accurate. And that way, the people who are more in the path of these storms can get out of the way. I think it costs $1 million on average to evacuate a mile of coastline.
I believe it.
So if people who didn't have to evacuate didn't do it, then that would save a lot of money for those people and the governments of those areas. So, and then the people who are in the way know, okay, I really need to take this seriously. So again, that's one of the more reasons why they are so important for flying these storms. They also let us know impacts. They let us, these aircraft themselves, so beyond the drop signs that we talked about, the aircraft themselves have weather instruments on them, on the wings, that kind of, it kind of sends sensors down to the surface. It lets you know sea surface temperature. It lets you know the wave height, all sorts of different things to let us know what's going on through the storm. I mean, it really does take a snapshot of what's going on throughout the hurricane. And again, these aircraft all have instruments on board and within the drop signs that are gathering this information.
So basically, the hurricane hunters that help with the National Hurricane Center, it's kind of like, students or, those who launch the weather balloons at the National Weather Service and all across the nation help the Storm Prediction Center. So it kind of, everyone kind of helps because they all want to be on the same page. There's people who launch weather balloons at Texas A&M, for example, Texas Tech, places like that. So
yeah, and a lot of these men and women who are in the Air Force Reserves, not the NOAA Corps part. Remember, two different groups: NOAA Corps, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They have a group that flies, and then the Air Force Reserves have a group that flies. And some of these men and women on the aircraft are reservists. And that means, to put it in the most simple terms, they're doing this part-time. So the first weekend out of every month and 2 weeks out of the year, they'll train and also fly hurricanes or tropical cyclones in general. So really interesting stuff.
Yeah, so Emma says hi. Hey, Emma, glad that you're joining us on your mom's Facebook account. And then Sandra wants to know, how do pilots fly through storms?
The answer is that radar. That lets them know where it's kind of safer to fly or where it's not as safe to fly. Notice that radio set on, or the headset on the pilot there. So they're all talking. Everybody on the aircraft is talking to each other and guiding themselves through the storm. The navigator talking about that map. Where are we? Or where are we flying? All the weather or all the instruments in general on the aircraft help the pilots know what height I'm at. Where, what part of the hurricane am I about to fly through? And the meteorologist on board will also be guiding them, saying, hey, we've got an area of a large updraft, or we could have possible hail in this part of the hurricane. You can have hail in a hurricane. And if that meteorologist catches that, or they see an area where there could be a waterspout or tornado that could also impact the pilots or the aircraft itself, they'll say, hey, let's take a certain degree turn to the right or to the left, and let's miss this part and fly through this part of the storm. So that's how they fly through the storms. You may not be able to see anything. You can't see anything out of that cockpit. You only see clouds. Until you come out into that eye, there's nothing. You can't see out except anything but clouds. But that's why all those instruments on the aircraft are important.
So my question too is, and I don't know if you've covered this, but as far as tropical systems outside of that, the hurricane hunters have different missions that they fly into as well.
Sometimes they fly into, recently, let me backtrack here, excuse me. Recently they flew an atmospheric river mission over the Pacific to gather information on rain systems that make their way into the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
So really fascinating there. Sometimes they fly nor'easters, which is a winter system that moves up. A big
winter storm, yeah.
That moves up the northeast United States. And they've flown missions in other countries regarding weather patterns before as well. So all sorts of different things. And I see that Matthew asked, any close calls that have happened in the airplanes? Matthew, the answer is yes. Sometimes the aircraft can be struck by lightning. Sometimes it can be hit by hail. Sometimes they could lose an engine or even two engines. But the thing is, they have 4 engines. Remember, they have 4 propellers. I'll go ahead and bounce it back to this graphic here, and notice 4 propellers. So as long as they can keep wind going under those wings, they can keep those aircraft flying through the air, and they can stay flying. And they've had issues where they've had to make early landings at other airports before. But when I flew to the Bahamas with the hurricane hunters in the C-130, we flew a Category 4 hurricane and made several passes. They don't just pass through once. They'll do this crisscross pattern, and they'll fly through the hurricane multiple times. We flew all the way from Biloxi at Keesler Air Force Base to the Bahamas, flew several passes, and then flew all the way back. And we weren't just in any part of the Bahamas. We were southeast, so we were far away. And that was just on one flight. No need to make a stop anywhere. They just going. So. And
here's what I like with the graphics that you see every day on KINS 5 that our weather team uses. We can actually see the hurricane hunters flying in a certain direction and receive that now data. So that's something that we can actually see, and we can show you guys when hurricane season is around. And we can also see that, with different storms as well.
Yeah, and I actually have a website that I pull up to see whenever they're doing practice missions as well. And I was going to show it to y'all just in case we do have a way to show it to you, but It doesn't look like they're in the air right now, or they also haven't done any missions within the past 6 hours. So there's nothing to see there, but maybe in future Facebook Lives, if I see that they're out doing something, I may show it, because it also shows the information that they're getting from their weather instruments. And if they do send out a dropsonde, I can see that latest dropsonde information. So I don't see any more questions. I see Emma says hi. Hello, Emma. I hope you're doing well today. So all this information can sometimes lead to a hurricane getting upgraded, because we don't have any other way of finding out how strong the wind speeds are in these hurricanes unless these hurricanes move over a buoy that is gathering wind data. And so when they fly through a storm, they gather this wind data, and it can cause a hurricane to be upgraded. Remember the Saffir-Simpson scale. This is how we grade a hurricane.
And it goes by maximum sustained winds, not wind gusts. You know, wind gusts will be a completely different thing. I mean, you can have what, a category 1 hurricane, maximum sustained winds of, let's say, 90 miles an hour, but gusts up to 120.
Right.
So that's not going to increase it to a Cat 3. That's just going to keep it at a Cat 1. So we just go off sustained wind, maximum sustained wind.
Right. And here's a look at the 2020 Atlantic hurricane names. And guys, I'm going to bring this full. I'm going to go get something out of my room here. I actually have a Hurricane Hunter patch, and I forgot to bring it out before I
was going to ask you if you had it, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Let me go get it. Meteorologist Meagan Massey, though, is going to talk about some of these 2020 Atlantic hurricane season names, and then also that forecast from Colorado State. We have a graphic that I had updated earlier to kind of show what the forecast is from Colorado State University, which is a university, even though they're landlocked inland the United States, not near the coast. They actually have a group of scientists at Colorado State University who put out forecasts every year. And some of the best tropical meteorology studies for universities in the U.S. is happening at Colorado State University. It's fascinating.
Definitely. So let's get into the names here. We're going to look at Arthur. You know, we have Bertha, and one thing interesting about tropical hurricane season names is every 4 years they have a different list, so they kind of cycle through the same list. However, some names, kind of like Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Harvey, will get retired based off their strength and the impact that they cause. So some names will be retired over time, right, Andrew?
That's right. Some names do get retired. Andrew is one of them.
Andrew, yep.
92 is Hurricane Andrew, I think. Hurricane Harvey retired, of course. That's another storm that was really bad. But yeah, if the storm did a certain amount of damage, they will retire the name. Now, there is a storm that they started. Let me backtrack that a little bit. There was a storm that hit the United States, that hit Texas actually, back in 1900, and it didn't have a name, and that's because that was before they started naming the storms. It was the 1900 Galveston hurricane, and it was actually the deadliest hurricane to ever hit the United States. We had talked about that. I think it was last week we talked about historic hurricanes, didn't it?
We did. Yeah, we talked about the history. Yeah. So kind of a history lesson there. If you happen to miss that, you can also find it.
So this goes on the shoulder of the Air Force Reserve's hurricane hunters. I am not a hurricane hunter, but they did give me this patch whenever I flew with them. I do not wear it as if I was one, but I do keep it as a keepsake from the flight that I got to fly on. It was my dream to one day get to fly into a hurricane, and I was able to. So that's what it kind of looks like. It's you see, it says the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron on the bottom. That is group. They are part of the 403rd Wing, which is Keesler Air Force Base, and they're the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, and you saw the hurricane symbol on that. Now, below that patch, sometimes they wear one of these, and it's the number of how many hurricanes they've flown into. I got this one. It says 001. There is a guy who's a loadmaster that I got to talk to, and he has on his arm a bunch of tattoos for all the different hurricanes he's flown through. So
That's awesome.
these men and women, I got to meet so many of them, and
Yeah.
I will tell you, they're great people. They do very important work, and they're all very nice and friendly.
And I'm sure they have some interesting stories with each, tropical system, because like we say, each tropical system has its own narrative, its own story.
Yeah, and the guy that I was talking about with the tattoos, I believe it was Master Sergeant Jeffrey Stack, and he was telling me that he flew through. I asked him, "What's the craziest hurricane you ever flew through?"
Mm-hmm.
He said Wilma. Now, Wilma used to hold the record in the Atlantic Basin for the lowest pressure. It was a very strong storm, not necessarily at landfall,
Mm-hmm.
but when it was out over water, it was still very strong. He said that there was hail hitting the bottom side of the wings. They lost an engine.
Wow.
Got struck by lightning or something. He said it was just a crazy flight.
Mm-hmm.
And again, all this stuff can happen, but these airplanes that are flying through these storms are tanks in the sky. I mean, those C-130s are serious.
Mm-hmm.
So they can tend to handle that kind of stuff a little bit easier.
So now we're getting into the forecast here.
Yeah.
And they're still forecasting an above average season.
Yeah, that's the 2020 forecast by
Mm-hmm.
Colorado State University. Now, the National Hurricane Center puts out a forecast as well, but they typically wait until June 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, Colorado State University will put out another forecast themselves around that time.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of like an early season forecast, kind of like whenever we're talking about football, who before the season even starts, who we think could win the Super Bowl,
Mm-hmm.
or how we may think we could do on tests, or when we take a class early in the year.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's important to know when you see this type of stuff that it doesn't necessarily mean each storm is going to make landfall. This is strictly based on our weather patterns,
Mm-hmm.
sea surface temperatures, just all sorts of things go into this forecast.
I see it's my birthday. Ainsley, happy
birthday, Ainsley.
I hope you have a great one. Ainsley says, thank you. Are you in? If you're asking if I'm in the Air Force Reserves, if I'm a hurricane hunter, I am not. Maybe one day, but I am not one right now. But yeah, guys, I think that pretty much wraps up our lesson today.
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring the schedule up full so you get an idea about what we'll be talking about for tomorrow. Just give us 1 second here as we you can kind of see it in the bottom left corner of your screen, but I know
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard to see. So we have El Nino versus La Nina on Wednesday. That's going to be a really fun topic, which also impacts tropical meteorology.
Plays a huge role. So like I just said, our weather patterns, that's La Nina and El Nino.
Yeah, and that doesn't just impact the tropics. That can actually impact the entire world. This is a weather
Right.
pattern type thing that
Mm-hmm.
impacts the entire world. So El Nino and La Nina are fascinating and really fun topic to talk about for Wednesday. On Thursday, it's cyclogenesis. Is how cyclones, these not tropical cyclones necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but something we call a mid-latitude traveling cyclone, areas of low pressure
Mm-hmm.
that we typically talk about here in the United States. We're going to be talking about that. And then it's Fun Time Friday. Send us your photos and stuff, guys. We'd love to share it with you, and or share photos that y'all send to us. And we'd love to hear your stories. Send them to us at awilson@kens5.com, Massey@kens5.com, or also Bill Taylor will be hosting it. If you want to send it to btaylor@kens5.com, that's
Mm-hmm.
great too.
And Massey, you had talked about drawing a picture of the solar system. Send that to Bill. Send that to us. Let us know, and we'd love to share that picture. We would just want to know that you guys are enjoying these classroom talks and what you've learned, what your favorite, let's say, planet would be, tropic season, what's your favorite weather type. So make sure to share that with us.
Yeah, but guys, we're going to go ahead and sign off of here for now. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Yes.
We do have a chance for some strong storms tonight into Wednesday morning, so make sure you stay weather aware. Meteorologist Meagan Massey is actually about to pick that up right now for us. That way we can get a good at it.
Yeah, so I just want to show this. This is kind of the updated look, and I had talked about this on midday for areas like Dallas and Fort Worth. So that's going to be Dallas and Tarrant counties. If you have any family and friends up into the Dallas area, just make sure that they're staying weather aware. I just contacted my parents telling them, heads up, strong wind gust up to 70, even 80 miles an hour will be possible for you guys this evening. So just a simple text to say, hey, can you guys watch your local meteorologist, or just stay weather aware. So make sure that if you have any family and friends within that bullseye, that level 4 moderate risk, just make sure that they have a way of receiving those severe weather alerts. But for us here in South Texas, San Antonio still under that level 1 marginal, but up to a level 2 slight risk. And that includes San Marcos up into the Austin area. And then you have Waco, Temple, Killeen in that level 3 enhanced risk. So overall, the bigger picture for us here at home, just know that strong to severe storms will be possible. And the primary threats tonight will be damaging wind gusts up to 65 miles an hour and also quarter-size hail, but mainly for northeastern counties. But if you're in Bexar County, I still wouldn't let your guard down since we are so close to that level 1 marginal risk.
Yeah, make sure you have your weather aware tonight. Remember, that's really going to be even more for Wednesday morning. And then Wednesday afternoon, it should be great weather to spend time outside again.
Yeah, it's going to be nice this weekend too. Just a little hot.
Yeah, a little bit on the hot side. So guys, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed the talk about the hurricane hunters today. It's something I'm really passionate about. I find it fascinating, and so thankful for those men and women that fly into those hurricanes and gather that data. And don't forget, Tropical Tuesdays every Tuesday. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about next week yet, but I'm going to think of a really good topic to talk about. So just be sure to tune in. All right, guys, have a great Tuesday.